Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We'll start in a minute. Let's give some more time for everybody to join. For those of you already joined, let us know you can hear us by putting where you're joining us from in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. All right, so we have people from Danbury, Phoenix, more people from Phoenix. Wow, that's awesome. From San Francisco, and one person from San Diego. Welcome. There's more people coming from Austin, Florida, New York, and we have someone from Toronto. Welcome, Canada. Huntsville, thank you. And again from California. Wow, so many people from California. And someone from London. Okay, guys, so looks like everyone's with us. Thanks again for joining us today for our webinar about essentials of Pardot marketing automation. We really hope that you find some great value in us and get some great ideas for your organization. My name is Michelle Daniels, and I'm with Comelite Cloud. For those of you who don't know, Comelite is a Salesforce consulting partner based in San Diego, providing professional consulting, customization, and implementation services for Salesforce and Pardot users, mostly in the US, but also in Canada and the UK. We have worked with over 100 companies in the past years and helped them to get most out of their Salesforce and Pardot investment. We know B2B firms need to unlock the true potential of Pardot, and we assist them to reach this goal by providing training, strategic guidance, audits, configuring automation, building engagement studios, and ongoing support. So on our agenda, after the intro, we're going to be talking about organizing your Pardot assets. I hope you see my screen. Next is learning about user roles in Pardot. Right after that, we'll see why you should be using automation tools. And the last part is how to make sure the email is delivered to prospects. Finally, we'll have some time for Q&A. I'm going to end for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to our Pardot specialist, Deepak Pal, who's going to do the demo for us today, which is going to be the main part of the webinar. If you have any questions on content or topics, or if you just want more information about anything that we cover, feel free to use the GoToWebinar chat feature, and you'll find that at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just feel free to put your questions in there, and we'll have time for some questions at the end today. Deepak, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it over. Thanks, everyone, again for joining. I know you have busy schedules.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the webinar. I am Deepak Pal. I am Salesforce Certified Pardot Specialist, and I'll be conducting today's webinar. So let's get started. So we'll begin with the introduction of the Pardot marketing platform. So Pardot is a marketing platform provided by Salesforce that integrates seamlessly with your Salesforce account. So you do not have to switch between the Salesforce and the Pardot to check out what is going on with your prospects and how your prospects activity, how they are performing, how they are interacting with your assets. So you do not have to make any switches between the Salesforce and Pardot. You can get it all set up in the Salesforce with the Pardot app. So there are a lot of features that Pardot provides, which help us to market more easily and gather more leads. So they are delivering the personalized content, smarter lead generation, email marketing, better ROI reporting, lead nurturing, and prospect activity tracking. Apart from these, Pardot also provides a lot of reports which will help us analyze how our marketing content is performing and how the prospects are interacting with us, how our landing pages are performing, how our forms are performing, how our form handlers are performing, so that the business can take decision as to where they can improve, where they can put more time and assets, and that's all we can do. So what delivering personalized content, what does this mean is, let's say we have prospects coming in from different cities, someone coming from New York, someone coming from some other city. So what we can do is we can deliver the personalized content based on the prospect's city, where the prospect is coming from. So we can create our email templates, we can create our landing pages, so that when someone visits from one particular city, they will be seeing the content based on their city, not a generalized content. So we can deliver the personalized content, and it can change dynamically based on the criteria that we define. And smarter lead generation. So with the smarter lead generation, we can generate lead like we do in Salesforce Web to Lead form. What we can do in Pardot is we can create a form, or we can create a Pardot form and use it in our website, so that any prospect that fills out a form in on our website will be directly gets created in Pardot, and then we can nurture that lead until it becomes a marketing qualified, and then we can push them to the sales, so that sales can start working on them and close a deal. And we have email marketing. We can do the email marketing. We can send one-to-one emails. We can send list emails, and then better ROI reporting. We have the whole thing is tracked from the campaign, from the very beginning, the campaign and all the interaction of the prospects that it has with the contents, and then at the end we can monitor the ROI on the campaign. So lead, and then the lead nurturing is Pardot provides Engagement Studio and programs for the older accounts. So Engagement Studio, you can nurture your leads until it becomes marketing qualified, so that we can pass them to sales. And we have prospect activity tracking, so we can track the prospect activity from its initial stage, even before the prospect came into our systems. So what happens is Pardot sets up a tracking code. It will keep the prospect's activity tracking, and once the prospect becomes a lead in our product system, we will have all the activity that the prospect was going through, browsing through your website pages. All those will list up under prospect activity once he converts into a prospects. Okay, so let's move forward with the how can you organize your product assets. So it is very important to organize your product assets in a folder structure. So as our marketing initiative goes, the content that we create gets bigger and bigger as our marketing initiatives goes. So it is really important to organize our folders, to organize our contents into folders, so that later on, when we want to analyze, when we want to know which files we have put into which folders, we can easily search it out, and it makes a logical sense. Okay, so what is a folder? Folders, you can organize and nest your content and marketing assets in a way that makes sense for your team, and apply folder permissions to control which users have access to your marketing assets and content. Okay, so that is why we should be using the Pardot folders. By default, Pardot gives us uncategorized folders, and they have created sample folders within that, and all of the content goes into those folders. So from our point of view, from the business point of view, we must be creating the folders logically, so that we can have it will become easy for us to later track the to later track the assets that we have created and how they are performing. And it also helps us reduce the redundant images or the redundant files that we might be hosting in our Pardot, and which may cause problems later when we use them in our landing pages or email templates. Because once we put all of the files that we receive or that we are working on in uncategorized folders, what will happen is you will not be able to identify which file is related to which campaign, which file am I going to use in one particular campaign, right? So when we create it logically, you will easily know my one particular assets is being placed into one particular folders, and we can easily access it. Okay, the other thing that we can do is with a folder is we can control the security. Okay, so going forward with uh, the few of you might be using the Pardot for a very long time, and you may not have set up the folder structure until now. So we might run into scenarios like I have never set up a folder structure, or my folder structure isn't accurate, right? And my folders are too complicated. Or we may run, somebody may say my team is large or complex, and folder placement is inconsistent. So why we are saying that we can control the security of the content with the folder permissions is we can create folders and then assign permissions to a limited set of users. Okay, so let's say we have two different teams working on two different contents. If we have not created the folder structures, then giving two different teams separate access will not be possible. So we'll have to create the folder structure. We will have to create the folders, organize our content into those folders, and then assign the permissions to those folders to the respective salesperson or the team working on that. And how can we do that? So if you also have some sort of like this problem where you do not have a folder structure, you have never set up a folder structure, or it is very complicated, there are few ways by which we can easily um, by we can easily set up our folders, or we can manage folders. So we can use the table actions to organize the Pardot assets. We can organize folders from within the folders. We can manage folder accessibility using the Pardot custom roles or the permissions. And there are a few considerations that when using with the Pardot assets or the Pardot folders, and that is users cannot be put into folders, prospects cannot be put into folders, or anything under prospect administration or the report menu cannot be put under the folders. So before we moving on to managing the product user roles, I would like to show you how we can control the folder permissions. So we can go onto the folders and we can create the folders right here. Um, just give me a minute. I shall be logging in. All right, I hope you're able to see my screen. So when we can create folders, and then like we can organize it this way. So by default, we come with an uncategorized folders, which have all these subfolders in which directly all the files goes in. But we can create this is the uncategorized folders, and then we can create our own folder like this. We have created webinar campaign August, and then we can create separate folders to put all the files in a relative manner, so that we will know this is the folder that we created for a campaign which has happened in the August. We can give it a logical naming. We can give it a name which our team will understand, and then we can put the folders here. So uh, if you want to have some files moved to a different folders, as I was saying, few people may say that we have not set up the folder structure yet. So what you can do is you can directly uh, do a drag and drop from here. You just drag it and drop any of the folders that you may create. So you can manage folders from within the folders. So this is, you can directly drag and drop to any of the folders and it will move to that. Okay, so this is like you can manage the folder settings. Okay, one item's moved. And the second thing that I was saying about the security, what we can do is we go into the folders, um, and then we can click on this wrench icon to set the permissions for this particular folder. We'll say permissions, so we will need to create group. Then this group is created under the user management in setup. So we'll create a new user group and then assign this particular user group. So let's say I have a marketing super users group and they have all the permissions and I want them to have all the access to this folder. So I'll add users to this marketing super user group and then I'll give access to this group, to this folder, to the marketing super user group, and then I'll save it. So any user particular um, under that particular group will get the access. Okay, so let's move forward with our presentation. Okay, so next we are going to talk about how we can manage the user roles. So by default, Pardot gives us four default user roles, and a user role defines which Pardot feature and data a user has access to a user has access to. So when you add user, you assign them a role. You can use the Pardot default user roles. You can modify the default user role, but you can clone a role and add it to create a custom roles. So let's go one by one. The four default role that we have the administrator user role. The administrator user role is for power users. Administrator user role is assigned this role. You can assign this role to someone who must have access to all of the Pardot accounts and settings and all the modules. So we can assign them these administrator roles. So administrator has access to all settings, prospects, data, and module. Administrator is responsible for managing whole of your account. Okay, he can control, he can import, he can delete users, he can manage all the user management and other things. And the second we have is a marketing user role. So marketing users have control over the prospects data and marketing modules, including creating lists, forms, landing pages, and sending list emails. The marketing role is for users primarily working in the marketing and prospects module. They can manage prospects and they can send list emails. Okay, the other role is the sales role. The sales role has the simplest user interface view in Pardot. Sales can view, edit, and export prospects assigned to them only. So they cannot work with the bulk prospects. They cannot add with any other prospects like we have sales reps. So this particular role is assigned to the sales reps. So they will be working with only those prospects to which they have assigned to them, to which they are assigned. And additionally, they can send individual emails to the prospects, but they cannot send list emails. Sales users only have access to the prospect management functionality. Sales user can send one-to-one emails to prospects, but cannot send list emails. Okay, and we can define how many prospects a sales rep can work with on a user's profile, on a user's profile settings. We can define how many prospects a particular user can work with. Uh, okay, and then one we have is sales manager role. So the sales managers have access to all prospects data and visitors, but not marketing functionality. Okay, sales manager can send one-to-one emails to prospect, but can't send list emails. So sales manager also cannot send list emails, but they have a wider view from the sales profile. They can manage all of the prospects. Okay, sales rep only manage the prospects which are assigned to them. Sales manager manages uh, all other prospects. He has access to all the prospects. And if These are the four default rule, but there might be scenarios where we are not fitting in to this default Pardot user roles, and we might want to give some combination of permissions to some person. So what we can do is we can clone a role, and then we can edit the permissions. Okay, so what we can do is we can go ahead and clone a role, and then we can modify the permissions as we need. So how the way we do it is we go on to the admins and user management and then roles. So we'll be seeing the default role here, administrator, marketing, sales, and sales manager. And then if we want to give some users more access, what we can do is we can see it was directly onto the list. We can just copy the role, and then we can we can decide the permissions, right? We can uncheck the permissions that we do not want to give, and that's how we can uh, wider the access or create a custom role. We can give it a new name. Okay, and we can give it a new name, and then we can change the settings for marketing, prospects, and what all the access that this custom role will have. Okay, we can change it right by creating the custom roles. um, this is how we can work with the part with the default user roles that are provided to us by Salesforce and create a custom roles. So let's move forward to using the right automation tools. So Pardot provides a few automation tools by default. So um, they have segmentation rules, they have automation rules, we have dynamic list, we have segmentations. Okay, so what are automation tools? Automation tools in Pardot allows you to define certain roles that can be repeated over time, or that can run only once. Okay, now why to use Pardot automation tools? Using the Pardot automation tools, what we can do is we can we can define certain rules that will reduce the efforts needed from the sales and marketing team to better engage with the prospects and close deals in a more systematized manner. In a more They can close deals more fastly by focusing on the work to which they should be focusing on, rather than doing something which can be done by out of the box. So what the automation tools that we have are the completion actions. Completion actions runs every time a prospects perform some actions, such as submitting a form, uh, filling out a form on a landing page, downloading a file. With completion action, you can send an autoresponder email. You can you can add prospects to a list. You can add to a Salesforce campaign. You can add tags to categorize prospect. You can assign prospect to a specified user, or you can assign prospect via your Salesforce active assignment rule. And that is what the main feature, I mean, that is what we can say is a good part of Pardot. You can also use your Salesforce active assignment rules to assign the prospects that are coming in. You do not have to that's so whatever your lead rules are set up, you can use those rules to assign prospects that are coming in, or you can manually assign to any of the prospects. There are a few considerations to keep in mind when using the completion actions. Completion actions are not retroactive. So completion, what that means is they apply only to activities that happens after the completion action is added. Okay, so it will not affect the one which have already happened. It will only affect the one going forward. Okay, and the completion action executes every time they are triggered. However, adjust score and send autoresponder emails are throttled, which means the score when we define a completion action to adjust the score of a prospect or to send an autoresponder emails, that will not be running every time. Okay, they may be running after few minutes gaps, and rest of the actions are executes all time whenever we submits a form. And we also need to keep in mind that completion actions do not execute on image file downloads. Completion action don't execute on filtered activities. We can define some filtered activities in Pardot, and completion action will not run on those. Okay, so let's move on to the automation rule. So automation rule is continuously running and looks for the prospects who have matched the criteria that you have specified in the rule. Automation rule matches a prospect one time. It allows to take actions. It allows to take action on those prospects who matches the criteria that we have defined. Okay, so automation rule has three steps. One is defining the automation rule, and that we need to define the rule criteria when a particular rule will run. So we can say, okay, let's if is from the somebody is from the New York State, let's change their score. Okay, so this changing the score is an action that we define on an automation rule. And when we say this rule will only run when the state is um, let's say any xyz, and that is what the criteria is. Okay, so we define the criteria and it will run for all of those prospects. So let's say if a prospect country is United States, then change the score of a prospect. So that we can do via the automation rules. Okay, so the things that we can have in the automation rule is we can manage the list memberships, add tags, adding to a Salesforce campaign, changing the profile criteria, changing the score, assigning the prospect to a user or a group, and sending emails. Automation rules are not retroactive, which means uh, changing the criteria will only be applied to the prospects going forward. They will not affect the prospects who are already existing in the system. And then we have segmentation rules. So segmentation rules allow you can use segmentation rules to create a list of prospects and apply a segmentation action based on a specific criteria. And unlike automation rules, segmentation rules don't run continuously. So segmentation rules only run once and match only the prospects that meet the criteria when the rule runs. You can use a segmentation rule to pull a one-time list of prospects in Pardot, and and we can define these rules in Pardot. I'm going to show you now where we define those. So we go on to the automation rules. Here we define the automation rules, and the way we can do is we can add the automation rules. Let's say country is United States, and then we will let's use it in the uncategorized folder right now. And then we can define a description here. We can add any tags to this rule, and we can select this checkbox to match prospects more than once. If we want to match the prospects more than once, we can check this, but it is advisable not to do it, as it will if we have defined too many automation rules, uh, it will cause load on the system to recalculate again. Okay, now we have this match all and match any. What this will do is we define a new rule. Okay, so it's an and or an or kind of thing. So when we say match all, so whatever rule we define, all the rule must be specified. So let's say if we are saying a prospect's uh, default field, and we say country, and we say is United States. So if we add a new rule and we say let's say prospects we'll choose a default field, only prospect default field, and we say the city is not empty. So when we say, when we define match all, you see this is an add. So these both condition must be satisfied for this rule to run. If we do match any, so either this one or this one, if any of the conditions are satisfied, then this rule will fire. Okay, so how it will fire is we define a new action, and in the action what we can do is we can have, as I was saying, we can add prospects to a list, and we can define multiple action. We can choose a list to which list we want to add. Let's say I'm adding them to a monthly newsletter list, and then we can define any other actions also there. So these are the options available that we can do. We can add prospects to a list, we can adjust the score, we can adjust prospect score for a scoring categories. So scoring category comes into picture when we define a particular, this also has something to do with the folder structures that we have created. So we can have different scoring categories based on the folders, different folders, and we can assign prospects to a user. We can change the profile criteria, we can change a custom field value, we can change the default field value, and we can mark the reviewed and notify assigned user. So in that way we can do all these via the completion actions. So when we create an automation rule, whenever the new okay, I just forgot to add the action. So we can say assign prospect to a user, and then the user will pop up and we'll select the user. So any new prospect that will have a country United States and the city is not empty, we will assign to this particular users. And then we created the automation rules. So any new prospect that comes in who will match this rule, uh, will be assigned to the particular user that we have created. So by default, the automation rules gets created in paused state. So what we have to do is we have to create, we have to activate it. So we can, or we can preview it first. We can preview the rules and we can see the list that is going to generate. If it is a short list, then it will get generated immediately, or we'll get a email, system email, um, saying that your list is ready. So we can view it right from there, from the mail. We will get a notification once this is completed, or we can directly resume the rule, and that, so this has completed and it is saying we do not have any prospect that matches this. So we can resume the automation rule, and once the automation rule is resumed, it will start running and looking for the prospects, the new prospects that will be entering into a system. Okay, so let's move forward with the um, yeah, automation tools. So we have dynamic list. So what dynamic list does is dynamic list allows a rule-based list that updates automatically based on the criteria that we define. Automatically add a prospects to a list that matches the criteria, and remove prospects from the list that do not matches the criteria. Okay, so dynamic lists are particularly helpful when we want to run an engagement program, or we want to have certain list that should be updated automatically and should not be updated manually. At that place we can use the dynamic lists. Okay, so how do we define, how do we choose which automation rule, which is the right automation tool to use? Okay, so we need to answer few of the we need to ask ourselves these questions and take the decision accordingly. So we need to ask if the action, if a rule is based, what is it is based on a criteria or an action. If it is based on an action, then we should go with the completion action. Okay, and then we need to check if it is a criteria based, we need to check is it one time only. So do we need this to run one time only, then we will go with the segmentation rule. Okay, if it is not, then further we need to check what is our desired outcome. If it is action on something, then we should be defining the automation rule. If we want just an updated list, we can create a dynamic list. Okay, so we need to consider these questions before going for the right automation tool that we should be using. Okay, um, this is how we can decide which one is best for us, and then we can select the automation uh, as per our business needs. Okay, moving forward to the email delivery and how we can ensure that our emails are getting delivered to to the prospects. So email sending, reputation, and deliverability are important at Pardot. Deliverability describe how likely it is that your message is delivered to a recipient inbox. Email sending reputation describes how respected your IP address is by receiving email server. Okay, so for a good email sending reputation, what we need to have is we need to define our email sending domain and our tracker subdomain. So what the tracker subdomain and email sending domain is. So when we define the tracker domain, we define the tracker domain in admin and then domain management. This is our product training org, so we have not set up the tracker domains yet. So by default, every product account gets this primary domain, which has go.pardot.com. So every content that we create, like if we are creating landing pages, and we go to the landing page, and any landing page, if we see, you see the vanity URL is go.pardot.com, and then uh, some URL is there, right? So when someone visits our landing page, so this is a sample landing page. So someone visits our landing page, it will be go.pardot.com for every account. Okay, so if there are 1,000 customers of Pardot, everyone will have the same go.pardot.com default tracker domain. So what adding a tracker domain does is we can create a tracker domain, and let's say if our website is www.comelitecloud.com, we want all our assets in the Pardot to be on the same URL, to be somewhat like same URL. So what we can do is we can create a Pardot tracker domain. We can add tracker domain like http colon www.2.comritcloud.com. So once we do it and then we enable the domain here, then we will be able to make changes on the landing pages or any of the product assets that is getting created. So right now we do not have the ability to modify this vanity URL. Once we set up the tracker domain, we will have the ability to give it a name similar to our website, which is comradecloud.com that we have. We can have all our assets in the product with the same URL format. So we can, once we enable it, we will get something like the we will this part http colon double slash go dot pardot.com will be replaced with your tracker domain. In our case, it will be http colon comradecloud.com and slash. You can then enter the name that you want. So you can customize this this sub URL that is appearing once you enable the tracker domain. So you'll be able to do it. And then we have uh, this email sending domains. Once we add the email sending domain using the sender poly SPF or the domain keys identified mail framework, which are the two major, which is used by an email server to identify whether it is coming from a good mail server or not. So that once these both of these are present, the tracker domain and email sending domains are present, then the chances of getting your email delivered to the prospect is high. Your email will not be bouncing. Your email may not will not be sending to the spam folders of the prospects once we have these enabled. So what we can, the it is advisable to do the setup of the tracker domains and email sending domains before we can send, before we should be going with sending out the list emails and any other emails. We also need to make sure that whatever the content that we are creating for our email templates, those those content must also have a text version. So if we go on to the email templates, if we look at the email templates, usually what people misses out on creating the email templates is they create the email template, they design it, but what they forgot to do is they forgot to create the text version of the email. So which is very much needed, so that the email clients where your HTML content is not rendered, your text version will be rendered. So make sure when creating an email template, like we are having it here, and we also have the text version. So let's say, I'm sorry. So let's say if this HTML content is not delivering, or our email client is not able to render it properly, then this text version is used. Okay. So this is, right now you can see this is not a very good email. If this were to be presented, the text version, this is directly synced from HTML. So what the mistake here is, we synced it from HTML, and that's why it has created all this thing. So consider a scenario, if this is going to be delivered to a customer, to a prospect, it will not be it is not good at all. So what we need to make sure is, whenever we are creating any HTML template, we should be writing the text version as good as we are writing the HTML, so that this text version will not have any of the images or anything, but we must make sure that we must convey our message to our prospects via this text version also. We can use the dynamic variables here to insert the prospect's name and whatever the message that we would like to convey, and that should be it. So make sure we have the HTML and text both version designed to be delivered, designed to be responsive in the uh, mobile devices also. And we must make sure that this text version is also created, uh, for every email template that we define. Okay, so that's all for today's presentation from my end. We will be taking your questions.
Um, Thank you, Deepak. A deep dive into amazing product features. Thank you. So yes, we have received some questions during the webinar. I'll start by answering some of the common ones or the most asked ones. First question is, what's the difference between automation rules and segmentation rules? Um, okay, so you can use segmentation rules to create a list of prospects and apply a segmentation action based on specific criteria. Automation rules run continuously, but that is not the case with segmentation rules. The segmentation rules run one time and match only the prospects that meet the rules criteria when the rule runs. So you have to create a segmentation rule when you need to run a one-time segmentation action on prospects that meet your criteria. Um, we have another question that says, is it possible to have multiple completion actions on one form or landing page? All right, so yes, it's absolutely possible. When there are multiple completion actions and a marketing asset, the actions that affect other automations run first. Okay, so let's see. We have another question here. It says, can I change the order of automation rules? Okay, so can I change the order of automation rules? Yes, you can, but you need to have a few points in mind though. One thing is, an automation rule will only affect a matched prospect one time. If you want to change a rule and have it affect the same prospects again, you would need to delete the first rule and recreate it with the changes. The second thing to have in mind is deleting an automation rule will stop it from running, but the actions it has already applied to prospects will not be undone. So an automation rule will resume if the rule is ever undeleted from recycle bin and unpaused. Let's see if we have more questions. Are there any other questions that Deepak can cover?
Okay, so we can adjust the default scoring rules by going into the automation settings and then scoring. And here we can change the here we can change these edit, we can do the edit scoring rules, and then we can change the score based on the things that we define. For example, email open right now it is 0. We can change the scoring from this page. We go into the admin and under that automation and then scoring. Is it possible to have multiple prospects with the same email address? Yes, it is very much possible to have multiple prospects with the same email address. For the previous accounts, this setting was not enabled, but for the newer account, this setting is enabled. You can check whether it is enabled in your account or not from the settings, and then you go into this allow multiple prospects with the same email address, whether it is enabled or not. You can have this enabled. There are a lot of consideration that needs to be considered when we enable these settings, uh, because the way these activities will be syncing is based on there are many considerations which we need to consider whilst after this has been enabled. So the activities syncs to the prospects who is most active on the, if the prospect with the same email address fills out a form, then it will get updated on the prospect with the most recent activity. Okay, so there are many considerations, but yes, you can have a multiple prospects with the same email address. Okay, can you explain a little bit about dynamic content in Pardot? Okay, this is also a very important topic in Pardot. So dynamic content, what it does is, so let's say I'm sending out an email, and right now that email has one particular image, where it is showing the, let's say, the country's flag. Okay, but what I want is, if that email is going to be sent to an India, or if it is going to send to Brazil, or if it is going to Argentina, what I would like to have is that flag automatically updated based on the country. So what I will do is I'll create a dynamic content. I'll do so show flags based on country. Okay, so we add a tag and we can do, so what is the default content if the country is not present? Okay, we'll define a default content that will appear, so we can edit the variations here. Yeah, it is now loaded. So what we can do is, let's say I'm adding a default in image, something like this. We are adding a default image, so this image will be present if nothing is present in our country. So we are doing the variation based on a field. Here we defined how we would like it. So our scenario is, let's say I'm doing is based on a country. So I will say I will look for the country. Okay, and then we have, if the country is United States, and then I'll edit the content here. Okay, so what we will do is, again we'll get a pop-up, and let's say now I am using the another different image. So you can select from the images. Okay, you can do anything that you want. You can change the content. Okay, let's say if the country is United States, maybe you can write the content in a different language also. You can add variations to it. Okay, if the country is US, you will display this content. If the country is Brazil, you will display this content. If the country is Argentina, you will display another content. So you can add variations like this uh, for in the dynamic content. So once we use this, and then what we can do is we can go onto the email templates or the landing pages, and then we will have the ability to to use this dynamically created content. I think I forgot to save it. Let me just check it again. I'm sorry. Yeah, we have not saved it. So let me just quickly do it. Show pack based on country, and I define default content. And I say if the country is United States. I'm just adding one variations to it for the for showing you how we can use it. Okay, I'm just taking any of the image, and then I do a save, and I do a save again. Now our dynamic content is created, and then we will go to the templates, or we can use it on the landing page also. So we'll go here and we'll do that at template. And now we will go to the, if you guys are familiar with the HTML content, so what we can do is we can add like we are showing the image. So what we will do is we will go into the variable tags. Just a minute. Top of the screen. Oh. It should be I'll have to check the settings why it is not appearing here when we are going for adding the content. But yes, that's how you do it. You define a dynamic content based on the conditions, and then it will change the content when we use that particular dynamic content in our email templates. So that can replace dynamically based on yes, the answer to the first question, yes, we can change the what is can you explain a bit about dynamic content? Yes, that is just we have gone through. What is the difference between Pardot campaigns and Salesforce campaign? Okay, so Pardot campaigns is Pardot campaigns works. Pardot campaigns is the first touch point of prospects. So unlike Salesforce campaign, where we can have multiple where we can have a member to multiple campaigns, we cannot have a prospects associated to multiple campaigns in Pardot. Okay, so Pardot is a one-to-one relationship with the prospects. So one prospects can be on one can be associated to a one campaign only in Pardot. So you may be wondering then how it works as comparison to Salesforce. Salesforce, we can have a member into different campaigns. Well, that is correct. But what we can do for that functionality is replaced here by the list. Okay, so you can create as many lists as you want and add a prospects to those different lists and then take actions based on that. Okay, so what we do usually in Salesforce, we create a campaign and add to a different campaigns so that we can send them respective marketing initiatives based on the campaign, right? So what we can do here is we can go onto the we can go for prospects, and then we can create list, and then we can add prospects to different list, which will work same as um, which will work same as um the campaigns in Salesforce. Okay, so let's say this is the prospect that we have. We can see the list that is prospect is part of. Right now, this is part of one list only. So we can create as many lists as we want, and we can add them to a list. Okay. All right. I think we have answered your questions. I end my presentation here. Over to you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Deepak. All right, guys, so this was our presentation for today. And we know that there are so many ways to use Pardot, and hope you learned at least one thing today that you can try on your own. If there's anything you need, you can always reach out to us at hello@comelite-cloud.com. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend.